I want to have special medical boards for integrative medicine and homeopathic medicine, and I'm licensed under that Arizona Board of Integrative and Homeopathic Medicine, and that's the license that I have this conversation under, and not my Texas license. I'm trained as an ophthalmologist and did traditional ophthalmology with a focus on cataract surgery for 30 years or so. I had a lot of fun being an ophthalmologist. I was able to do a lot of things that changed the way ophthalmology is practiced. I had a great deal to do with bringing intraocular lenses into this country, or the use of them. When I was trained, we would simply take the lens out of the eye, and people would end up wearing really big, thick glasses. Of course, those allowed you to see, but they were fairly disabling because everything looked 30% too big and 30% too close, and it was hard to walk or drive or whatever. So I was one of the early people to put lenses in eyes after cataract surgery. And then there were some problems with the European lenses that we used in the beginning, so I modified those and got lenses to work better, and then began to teach others how to do that. So that was one of the fun things I did. When I was trained, we kept patients in the hospital for 2 weeks with both eyes blinded, and of course, the elderly tend to become disoriented and even psychotic if you keep them in bed and blind them for a couple of weeks. So I developed a way to make a watertight incision so that they didn't have to stay in bed, and we could actually get them up and walk them immediately from the surgery table, and that changed a lot of things as well. And also we had a problem with people, the elderly, going into the hospitals. You know, elderly people have a tendency to get a particular pattern of living. They eat certain things that agree with them and that keep their digestive and urinary processes working. There are foods that upset them, and so you put them in a hospital and change all of that. They commonly get sick just from being outside their normal environment and often fall and hurt themselves. One of the things we began then to work on was outpatient surgery. So being able to operate on cataract and then have people go immediately home was a great benefit, and we helped, along with my anesthesiologist and internist, develop the techniques for that and taught how to do that. And I guess the next thing I did in ophthalmology that was kind of fun is I did the majority of the research for the laser that's used in LASIK surgery. So I did about 90% of that research for the company called Vissix. But during that process of doing the laser surgery, we didn't know that the laser wouldn't kill viruses. And so I was using the laser to carve the scar off of the cornea of a fellow from India that had leukemia. And it carved the scar off well enough, but it also released viruses from his cornea. And that went into my nose and into my brain, and I got encephalitis. And so I got to where I could see a patient, know what was wrong with them, but I couldn't remember how to write a prescription. I also developed spastic movements, so I'd be sitting there and all of a sudden I'd do something like that, which doesn't work really well if you're operating inside somebody's eyeball. And I had overwhelming fatigue. And so for all those reasons, I had to quit work at the end of November of 1995. And so I slept 16 hours a day, had 2 or 3 hours a day in which I could understand a newspaper, and then like a light switch, it'd go off and I couldn't understand it anymore. I went to the best doctors I could find in Boston and New York, et cetera, and they all said, well, you have 3 viruses in your brain. We don't know what to do about it. Good luck. So during that 2 or 3 hours a day I could think, I had to figure out how to get myself well. And so I began the journey of trying to figure out how I might do that. And one of the things that resonated with me was that every cell in the body had the same hardware. Even though cells look quite different, just like a laptop looks different than a desktop computer, they still have all the same basic parts. And I thought, well, if I can figure out how to make one cell work, I can make them all work. And so I started down that road, and I bought bunch of cellular biology books, which I hadn't read in 30 years. and began to read through them. And one of the things that resonated with me, it said that cells have to run at a pH of 7.35 to 7.45. Well, I didn't really remember much about pH except it was acid-base balance. But as an eye surgeon, I didn't really need to know much about that for 30 years. And so I began to study pH and discovered that pH is simply the measurement of voltage in a liquid. If you think about a copper wire, you turn the switch on and the electrons flow, you turn the switch off and they stop. But in a liquid, it can either be an electron donor or an electron stealer. And by convention, if the liquid is an electron stealer, you put a plus sign in front of the voltage. And if it's an electron donor, you put a minus sign in front of the voltage. By convention also, you take the voltage and you convert it to a logarithmic scale from 0 to 14 and call it pH. So plus 400 millivolts of electron stealer is the same as a pH of 0, and minus 400 millivolts of electron donor is the same as a pH of 14. When you read then that cells have to run at a pH of 7.35 to 7.45, that's a synonym of minus 20 to minus 25 millivolts, give or take a millivolt. So I said, oh, cells have to have voltage to work. That makes sense. And so all of a sudden, this new way of thinking about things was obvious to me. The next issue was, how do you measure it? Well, of course, if you take a standard pH meter, it has a switch on it. You can switch it from pH or millivolts, whichever one you want to have it read out. And you simply stick the probe in a liquid and it'll tell you what the pH is or what the millivolts is and or convert it to the logarithmic scale of pH for you. So I said, well, how do you measure it in the body? And I found that a chap named Nakatani was the first person to use modern electronics to measure acupuncture circuits, and published in 1951. So I got his rather rudimentary equipment, started measuring, and where my brain should be running at minus 25 millivolts, I found it was running between minus 2 to minus 4 millivolts. So then I knew why it didn't work. Didn't have the juice to do it. So the next issue is, well, what am I going to do about it? So I began to do some more reading and found that a Russian chap had figured out the waveform that would more efficiently transfer electrons to cell membranes. I began to try to learn about that and discovered that there was a Russian pediatrician named Zulia Valieva Frost. Zulia Valieva married a chap from London named Frost and had moved to London. And she was in the process of teaching people how to use this Russian device to transfer energy to cells. So I called her and I said, hey, I'm interested in what you're doing. And she said, well, as luck would have it, I'm teaching my first seminar in San Francisco in 3 days. I said, sign me up, I'll be there. So I went to that seminar and got the Russian device and began to recharge my cells. And in about 6 weeks or so, things began to get better. The other thing that happened about that time was that I was on an airplane and there was a nurse sitting next to me from this Dallas area. And she began to tell me that she had lymphoma, had this big tumor around her neck and scattered throughout her body, and that she had gone to Mexico, and in a matter of days the tumors were gone, even though MD Anderson had told her to go home and die. So I went down to visit with the docs that helped her to see how in the world they did that, and that was sort of the beginning of my journey along with this other business of the electronics to figure out how to get well. And one of the things they taught me was that essentially all tumors are associated with infection in your teeth, particularly root canal teeth. And so she had gone down and they had pulled her root canal tooth and cleaned up the infection in her mouth, and in a matter of days her tumors were gone. And she sent me not only photographs, but she sent me her medical records from MD Anderson of when she came back, and they proved that her tumors had disappeared. So I had a root canal tooth here in what's called the spleen stomach acupuncture circuit. And so my docs here in Dallas said there's nothing wrong with that tooth. But I'd also developed a bleeding disorder, and so I went back down to Mexico and had the dentist that had operated on this nurse work on me, and when she pulled that tooth, there was so much infection in the bone, it splattered all over her mask. And yet I had no symptoms as far as the tooth was concerned. But 48 hours after she pulled the tooth, my bleeding disorder was cured. And that was rather amazing. And then over the next 6 weeks or so, my brain started to work again. And so that's how I started going down this road of figuring out how the body really works and what the role of voltage is in the body, because it's obviously so different than what I was taught in medical school. One of the things that I was led to try to understand was acupuncture. Actually, that was part of a bigger picture in that I was sitting in my chair at home and I said to myself, well, obviously traditional medicine that I was taught told me go home and die. And so that obviously wasn't working so well. But that sometimes chiropractic works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes acupuncture works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes essential oils work, sometimes they doesn't, et cetera, et cetera. So there are all these various medical models that sometimes work and sometimes don't. So my thinking was, if I could figure out, there has to be a common denominator that goes through all of these. Otherwise, because, I mean, if things work, it's because it's following some basic laws, some basic rules of how things are supposed to work. If I could figure out what that common denominator was running through all of these different paradigms, then I'd know how to get myself well. And it began to become apparent to me that the voltage piece was the common denominator for all of these things. Now, obviously it becomes very complicated when you start, particularly someone like me who has no background in electronics or even in physics. I had, freshman college physics, and that was my background. The issue is, how do you figure out what the common denominator is? And I began to go down a different road in that I began to understand that there's no such thing as a bunch of little balls of electrons spinning around a charged ball in the center. It's been known for probably 75 years or so that that's really not what an atom is, but that we still teach that. And so I began to read and I fortunately was able to talk to some various people who had gone down that road before me and began to understand more about what an atom is, because if you don't understand what energy is, what an atom is, even how the universe works, you can't understand how a cell works. And so I began to consider that there were alternatives. So one of the things that was a great influence on me was the work of Schauberger, in the Swiss water specialist who had figured out how to make a flying saucer that was fueled by water. And he was captured by Hitler, as you probably know, and made to make us work in that industry for the Germans. He understood very, very well that there are things that spin right and concentrate the energy into a point, which of course we call implosion, and there's something that spins left that starts small and gets bigger and then disappears, we call an explosion, and that those are the two basic kinds of energy. Schauberger's work with water and energy was very influential on my road down trying to figure out how the body works. The other thing that was very powerful was to read the work that muscles are piezoelectric. And so I began to consider, and I was initially wrong. I thought our muscles were wired up the way a 12-volt battery is. You take the cover off of a 12-volt battery, and there are a bunch of 1.5-volt batteries all wired together in there. And I thought that's the way our body was wired up, that our muscles were just one big battery that provided power for the cells to work. But then I began to notice that there were patients that had normal total body voltage as I measured it, but there would be one circuit out or one organ out. And I said, well, then I have to be wrong about how we're wired up. And I began to consider that acupuncture meridians were stacks of muscle batteries wired together into one single column that provided power. And I was talking with one of my colleagues, Dr. Evans, about this, and he said, "Well, have you read Tom Myers's book, Anatomy Trains?" And I said, "No, I never heard of it." And he said, "Well, you should read it." So I get Myers's book, and Myers is a massage therapist who had access to cadavers, and he would use blunt dissection and started dissecting the fascia and discovered that it would go all the way from the toe to the head or all the way from your hands to the head and surround muscle batteries stacked one on top of each other, which is exactly what I had come to the conclusion we had to have in the body, but he'd already done the dissection. So I started with Myers's work. Now, unfortunately, he stopped at the neck, and a lot of the stuff I was interested in, like the eye, was obviously above the neck. So, but I started with his work, and I got anatomy apps, which fortunately allowed me to look at if on an acupuncture 2D drawing there's a line that goes from here to here, what muscle goes from here to here? And I could go to the app and figure that out. So what I was able to do was to develop a roadmap, an atlas of the muscle battery packs, and come to the conclusion that acupuncture meridians are simply stacks of muscle batteries surrounded by a common sheath or common stocking of fascia. And the other thing that had been reported is that fascia are simply semiconductors. So, of course, you know better than I, a semiconductor is a collection of molecules that moves electrons at the speed of light, but only in one direction. So that made a lot of sense. So then the fascia that we have surrounding our stacks of muscle batteries is simply the body's wiring system. So now we have a battery system. We have a wiring system. And that helped me begin to understand why things that didn't seem to make sense actually made perfect sense. So for
I want to thank the organizers of this conference for inviting me. It's a little bit unusual, I think, to have an eye surgeon speaking to physicists. But nevertheless, I'm honored that you would allow me to come and share some thoughts with you about the role of voltage in the body. I always start my lectures by announcing that I'm not speaking with my Texas MD license. The medical board of the state of Texas does not allow its physicians to talk about anything that's not standard of care medicine. And of course, standard of care medicine is pharmaceutical medicine, surgery, and physical therapy. And obviously what I'm talking about today involves other things. So I'm speaking today with my Arizona homeopathic and integrative medicine license. I want to acknowledge certain people that have contributed greatly to much of the information I'm going to share today. This is the Tenant Institute staff, and we have Dr. Marr and Dr. Hyde in the audience with us. If there are those of you who become intrigued by some of the things we're talking about, they'll be happy to help demonstrate to you how all of this works. In addition, I want to acknowledge Eileen McCusick, whom you heard speak this morning, and her major contributions to this area as well. So thank you, Eileen. So what are emotions? Well, people talk about having them, but most people don't have a real good definition of what they really are and how they work. In addition, in the over 50 years I've been in medicine, people have talked sort of in passing about the mind-body connection, but I found it was difficult to get anybody to explain to me what that meant. How does that really work? Well, they say, well, you know, if you have emotions, it makes you get sick. Okay, how's that work? And I found it difficult to find any solution or answer to that question. So the reality is that none of us can get through life without having emotional events. We have losses, loved ones die or disappoint us, our dreams go unfulfilled, we go bankrupt, we have car wrecks, we suffer injuries, all sorts of things happen. And then, of course, we now have this big epidemic in our country of soldiers returning from war and committing suicide. So this business about post-traumatic stress syndrome is, of course, become a major issue for us, and nobody really knows very well how to handle it. And here's a list of all of the various things that can happen with that. But we find that more and more people that aren't soldiers are having post-traumatic stress syndromes as well. So we need to get a handle on how to deal with that. Now, when this Time magazine cover came out, we were only losing one soldier a day. Now it's up to 20 a day. So 20 of our veterans a day are committing suicide. So we obviously need to figure out a way to deal with that. Now, the reality is that deployment and suicide are not necessarily related in the studies that have been done. But the important point, I think, of the military suicides is that pharmaceuticals are not very effective. Most people know that, and the studies have been done to show that there's really not a pharmaceutical that does very much in helping deal with suicides and the emotions that go with it. And I'm just passing through the studies that have been published about that. Now, in my observation, if you have treatment failures, it usually means you're using the wrong paradigm. And so I'm going to suggest to you a different paradigm as we go through the day. But I'd first like to tell you how I ended up sitting in this chair. I'm trained as an ophthalmologist and an ophthalmic plastic surgeon, and I did the majority of the research for the laser that's used in LASIK surgery by the company called Vissix. And I had a lot of fun doing that research, but unfortunately we didn't know at the time that the laser wouldn't kill viruses. So as I would be treating eyes, in particular, I treated this one fellow from India that had scars on his corneas, and I used the laser to remove those scars, but he had leukemia. Well, we didn't know that the laser wouldn't kill viruses, and so the viruses came up off his eye, through my mask, into my nose, and into my brain, and I developed encephalitis. And so the result of that was that I could see a patient and know what was wrong with them, but I couldn't remember how to write a prescription. And in addition to that, I developed spastic movements, so I'd be sitting there. It works really well if you're operating inside somebody's eyeball. And so for all of those reasons, I had to quit working at the end of November 1995. So I spent about 16 hours a day in bed sleeping, and I had 2 or 3 hours a day in which I could think clearly enough to understand a newspaper, and then like a light switch would go off and I couldn't understand it anymore. So during that 2 or 3 hours a day I could think, I had to figure out how to get myself well, because the best doctors I could find at NIH in Boston and New York and wherever just said, well, you got 3 viruses in your brain, we don't know what to do about it, go home and don't call us, we'll call you. So during that 2 or 3 hours a day that I could think, I began to try to figure out how to get myself well. And I began to think about the fact that all the cells in the body work very much the same, even though they look different. But that if I could figure out how to make one cell work, I could make them all work. And so I went out and bought 10 or 15 books on cellular biology and started reading them, which I hadn't done for about 30 years. And one of the things that resonated to me with those various books was that each one talked about the fact that cells are designed to run at a pH of 7.35 to 7.45. And so I didn't really know too much about pH. I remembered there was something had to do with acid-base balance, but I didn't really know a great deal more about it. So as I began to look at pH, I began to realize that pH describes voltage in a liquid. So if you think about the wires that are bringing the voltage into these lights and to your computers, etc., that's conductive electricity, of course, with electrons flowing through a copper wire. But if you talk about a solution has the...
All right, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, shit. All right. Sorry about this. I'm getting quite a bit of feedback. The only reason I'm coming in and trying to talk to you guys is just because I meant to do this earlier, but I couldn't find a mic that worked, and I wanted to give you guys a little bit of info about the man who's speaking right now, but I wasn't able to, so... So anyways, I was trying to, I'll try to fix this fucking echo there whenever I come back. But for now, we're just going to have to deal with it, I guess. So this is Jerry Tenant. He is a doctor. He is an amazing doctor who, as you heard, been through some shit. Initially, I was going to come on in between the first clip and now the second clip. But like I said, I wanted to come on and my mic wasn't working for whatever reason, and now I got this fucking echo. So it's kind of shitty. But anyways, that's besides the point. It is what it is. So, fuck, I lose my train of thought. Anyways, yeah, so Jerry Tenant, he's a great guy. He went through some shit. He learned some shit. This is not magic per se, okay? This is not something that is like casting magic or doing a circle or reprogramming your mind. However, if I were going to get into invocations of Archangel Raphael, and like I gave you an invocation of, well, I didn't give you an invocation of Thoth, but I talked about it yesterday. I talked about getting Mercury and all that stuff, doing all that to, it's all similar. God, I'm having a hard time here dealing with this fucking echo. It's really pissing me off. Sorry, everybody. But anyways, so I don't want to get anybody get in trouble or do wrong things, because I don't want people doing healing magic before they're ready. Because truth be told, I don't know if I'm ready for doing healing magic and shit like that. Like, I learned some lessons already. So I don't. It's not something I continuously do. However, what Jerry Tennant here is teaching, is telling, and trying to get the information out is something you continuously can do. It's it's affecting your cells at at the cellular level. How do you take in food and do exercise that will improve your cell growth? And if you do have a disease, if you have an issue, an illness, a disorder, well, then you can basically seek his help or look this information up, because there's a lot of it out there, which is what I did, and you can figure out how to find out where the muscle packs, sorry, the battery packs, basically, is how he puts it. There's different parts of your body, and for every where your cells in your body are divided up by all these different energy stations, where the energy all comes from one specific source, but it's all filtered throughout, and your muscles send electricity to these batteries that keeps the batteries topped up. So if you're not doing much exercise, then you're not keeping the batteries topped up. And from there, the battery, it has specific things like capacitors, and the other word that starts with an F, I can't remember now, but it sends the energy, the electricity to the cells to help them grow or die off when it's time, or regrow, kind of thing. So when disease happens, it's basically you either don't have that energy in your body to give to the cells. The cells are screaming, we need help, we need help. And this is when tumors and shit could happen if they're not getting what they need, or they're going to try to borrow off of other cells close by, other systems close by. You either don't have the energy because of lack of exercise, or it could be a couple other things, maybe drugs, chemical imbalances, prescriptions you're taking for other things that you think are helping, but could reduce this, and or you haven't taken in the right food, nutrients, you don't have the right pH level, stuff like that, for the actual, like he said, your organs continuously I've said this before, and this is where I got the information from. Your organs are continuously regrowing. You know, he actually give the exact how long your eyes have been here, your skin's been here, and all this and that. So the things inside your body that produce your cells are the exact same thing. So the things on the outside and the inside operate the same fucking way. So to make all that system strong, you have to take in the right food, and you have to have your pH level high. And this is where, you know, electrolytes come from. Truth be told, I don't drink anything unless I put a little bit of Himalayan sea salt in it. And salt and water is electricity, it's electrolytes, it's those electrons that the body's going to need to send out. So the more you take in of that, the better you're going to be off, even if you don't go see Jerry Tenant or use his little fork thing, tuning fork, or any of those things. If you don't do any of that crap, if you just take in high levels, high pH, high alkaline water, shit like that, you're going to benefit. The benefits are going to be huge. He has many videos on YouTube that you can get this information from. He goes into different amino acids are very important, proteins, different things like that, and how your body has to take it in. Because in all honesty, for your body to absorb water by actually drinking it without minerals in it, and I'm not saying Himalayan sea salt, I'm saying minerals. In Himalayan sea salt, there is 80, 88, 81 minerals that the body needs. It's made by nature. It's, just like sea salt. It's made in the water, right? So there's minerals in the salt, and your body needs those minerals. Now it can be debated. We can argue why there's campaigns for sodium and no salt and less salt and sodium-free shit like that. And not all salt is bad. The natural salts are good for you and needed. In my opinion, you fucking need them. And anyways, this is what helped me get my daughter to where she is today. I told the story of my 2-year-old daughter. She was born in October, and that first winter, because we're in Canada, so that winter wasn't even as cold as this winter, but it was cold. We got to like the minus 32s and the minus 33s, and that was the highest. And anytime, if she had a bath, she loves baths. She's that little scorpion, that water sign. She loves playing with the water. You ever want to calm her down, you give her water, she'll just over and over pour it in and out of cups. But truth be told, since I found this, I haven't made her a bottle. Whether it was her formula when she was really young, it was milk, it's juice, whatever. I put salt in it. Every single fucking thing. I do that. I put that in there. I got her hooked on soup. everybody talks about soup when you're sick, right? And why is that? Well, because, you know, people run out to go get the kids Pedialyte, and they run out to go, and I've done it, Gatorade or Powerade, and I honestly, one of those is not a very good one, so do your research on that. I'm not going to diss anybody here, but anyways, the soup is doing that. I mean, the noodles in there are great, the carbohydrates and all that, great for your food, but you got water, hot water at that, and salt. Well, what does warm water and salt do? It kills infection. Anybody who's ever had a piercing will know that. Oh, maybe a piercing in the mouth. I had my tongue pierced, and that's what they told me, gargle salt water if you don't have mouthwash. I use salt and water. If your tonsils are swollen, what do you do? If you have a throat infection, what do you do? Gargle warm water and salt. But anyways, there's nothing I don't, she has, and this, now because she's 2, she's turning 3 this October, so this was her second winter, and she went from having 6 ear infections that first winter when she was developing, and to having none this year, none. She wasn't on antibiotics once, and it was at the point where we thought, because like in Cornwall here, just in my little circle of not really friends, acquaintances, there's 4 or 5, I want to say, because I'm not sure if the one had to do it or not, 4 or 5 parents with kids same age as my daughter that had to get their kids, boys and girls, they had to get tubes in their ears because they were having the same problem. The infection wasn't going out. Water was staying in the ear, and they go out in the cold, or it would stay there too long, and it would get moldy, whatever. The dead skin couldn't do whatever it was supposed to do, and that would cause an infection, basically, because their little ears are still forming, and if they don't drain out right and come into the mouth and all that, or wherever it's supposed to go out, then it causes infection, and it has no way to get out, and it just gets worse. But anyways, so, and I truly believe it's from the information that I got from Jerry Tenant here by Alkaline, because after I watched it, I figured out, I picked up spirulina, which is an algae, which he's a promoter of a specific brand, but it's basically algae, how algae is so fucking good for your body, and that's what a spirulina is, I'm pretty sure. I want to say anyways, it's an algae. I don't know what specific kind, but I get one of those big tubs with 50 superfoods, and it's got everything from the algae to the amino acids to the chia seeds, everything in it. So I mash that all with everything, and that's one of the ways I stay super healthy. But so is the salt. I mean, you're literally drinking electricity when you're drinking salt and water, and it can be in juice, it can be anything. It doesn't have to be much. Gradual. The more you add, the better, but you don't have to make your drinks disgusting. And you don't even have to make drinks. If you can't do that, find a different mineral so you're still intaking the water. Find some other way to alkaline your water. There's debate over lemons, if they do that or not. There's debate over a few different things. There's videos saying it's not true and true on YouTube the last time I looked anyways. So I know the Himalayan sea salt, adding it to your water, is basically electrolytes. You're putting electricity in your water, you're drinking it, so you're putting that electricity in your body. Your body does something specific. Whenever you intake something, depending on what it is, your body compensates for it, and it creates a reaction inside your body, right? It's like the volcano project you do with the baking soda and the vinegar. Baking soda is a base, vinegar is an acid. When you add the two together, it makes an explosion. That's technically electricity. It's a liquid form of electricity, but it's electricity. Okay? Whenever you drink something base, your body will add something acidic to it. Now, you have stomach acids already to chew that shit up, so that's okay. Now, if you have something too acidic, it needs to be alkaline, or else you can have problems. Now, spicy foods, different things like that are fine. Your body knows how to protect against that. But there are specific things with, like Pepsi and Coke that deliberately fuck up that system, where that system doesn't know what to do. And if that's all you're intaking, I'm not telling anybody to stop drinking pop. I'm just saying, from the research I did, that shit is kind of very cleverly telling that system in your body that's the reason. It's trying to hold off, like, what are you doing? You're fucking killing me, man, And I'm not dissing anybody, because I've done the same thing, and I still drink, so I'm not, don't let your egos get away. I'm not trying to fuck with anybody, but what I am trying to get at is, this guy, it's huge, and he even talks about how emotion gets trapped in your body, how you can tell the difference between if it's actual affection or if it's an emotion. I don't know if it's this video or another video, but he talks about how emotion has an effect on us, and we know emotion is how we manifest things. So if you're having emotions trapped in your body, well, what is that? Well, that's an emotional fucking block, right? If you have an emotional block, it's going to affect everything from your shitty attitude to your actual health. So There's some things in here that could be considered fear-based media, possibly. I don't know. It gets into cancer and how root canals are considered that. So don't think that because you had a root canal, you're going to have cancer. That is not true. First of all, worrying about something is way worse than having or doing something. Meaning, if you're worried about lung cancer because you're smoking, well, the worrying is actually worse than the actual smoking. So don't worry. If you're doing both, then yeah, you're fucked. But if you're going to smoke, don't worry. And if you're not going to smoke, well, then you can worry, because then it's still only 1 out of 2. But if you're doing 2 out of 2, well, then you're getting the third step, cancer. But anyways, I have specific books and different things in here that you can literally help clean, rinse out your TV, get rid of infection, get rid of dead tissue. A free book I picked up, and I was looking for it before this. I was supposed to put this on early in the morning, but I hadn't, because I was trying to find that book. I was trying to record it and put the audio clip on here because I didn't want to put something out saying root canals equal cancer, basically. And, you know, that's kind of what happens. I hope to God you guys aren't hearing this echo, and if you are, I'm very sorry. But, oh shit, I lost my train of thought again. Anyways, okay, so that's better. Oh God, the echo's finally gone. So, what I was saying? Oh yeah. So there's a solution for your mouth, basically, you know, and this works to clean your teeth, keep your breath fresh, and it's the right way to do it without killing your enamel and without risking having root canals and cavities and shit like that. This is the way you're supposed to brush your teeth, and not with the stuff we use today. So I'm gonna put that on here if I can find it before the episode's done. If I can't, I'm very sorry, but I'll put it on one of the following ones just so I don't leave people scared and thinking I put something out there saying, hey, root canal and scars equal cancer. And that's not true. You know, the statistics are there, but these are people that don't take care of their body. And the point he's getting at is a root canal is basically, he says dentists are the only doctors that can get away with leaving dead tissue in the human body. Because no other doctor would do that, because dead tissue equals infection. Infection equals, you know, risk. So yeah, if you're cleansing your mouth and you're taking care, then yeah, you're not going to have to worry about that. However, if you had root canals, well, he gives you some options and what you can do, reverse it. And if it's not on the clip I have on here, I'll try to find it. And if not, do your own research and find it. You should always research the shit I put on here anyways, not just take it word for word. Once again, your worrying or your belief can be worse than the actual thing you're doing. All right? Someone thinking they're going to go to hell, it can fucking really fuck them up, even though hell doesn't exist. But anyways, so this isn't magic per se, but it all ties in, you know. The element of air. Scorpio is the element of water, and, you know, it's argued that they're the strongest healers and stuff like that. Yet, Hermes is the one who holds the caduceus. Archangel Raphael holds caduceus. And what is the caduceus? Well, it's those two snakes wrapped around. Snake is one of the scorpions. Transformations. The Scorpio is the only one that transforms. It begins with a scorpion, and then it becomes a snake, which the snake is the very good level of healing, hence why Hermes holds the caduceus. And then after that, it's the phoenix. So there's some water, and emotion is definitely important in healing, as is air, as is Archangel Raphael, as is Hermes, as is Thoth, as is Mercury. It's also important. They tie in together. And just so happens, like I said last time, Saturn is part air element as well. So we kind of know that Saturn has things to do with this anyways. But there is a correlation. I don't know if anybody's going to pick it up or not, between Mercury, Mercury. When I say Hermes, I mean Thoth too. I know they're two separate guys, but the same guy all the same time. They did two separate things. I get that, but that's all inclusive. Hermes, Thoth, and Archangel Raphael, they're all kind of connected, them guys. And it's air. It's the element of air with the element of water, both together. So if you put those together, you know, we're talking about taking water and putting salt in it. You know, well, what's water? It's H2O. It's water and air. What's healing? What's our bodies made out of? So there's a whole lot of stuff here. So if you're thinking I'm putting on some non-magic stuff, think again. And the reason it's on magic on a budget is for the simple fact that I live in Canada, so my healthcare is free. However, for someone in the States, if they can fix a lot of health problems just by doing this, if their daughter is in a similar situation as mine was, and you can stop going to the doctor 6 times and having to pay for antibiotics and then all the Tylenol that comes with that because of the fevers and all the missed sleep and the missed work, that's a lot of money you're missing, right? If you simply get your daughter or son on an alkaline drinking diet, you don't have to change anything else, okay? Because I may be vegan and I may not believe in eating meat, but I don't believe in kids not eating meat either, unless you have definitely 100% got them on a very high protein, very high amino acid diet. Now, I do a lot of research saying that our bodies can't even intake the meat, and that the meat we eat does deteriorate our different parts of our bodies. There was a well-known movie that was on Netflix. I can't remember the name of it. What the Health, I think it is actually, which talked about how diabetes is actually caused initially from meat, because the meat tears apart your pancreas, and then when you go to eat sugar, your pancreas can't neutralize all that sugar anymore. And it's not actually, the sugar seems like it's the fucking one, but it's really a red herring, which a red herring in a book is the person everybody thinks is the bad guy or the criminal, and it turns out it's someone else. And the red herring is actually the meat, basically. But I ate meat all my life, and I'm in pretty good health. As a child, I played sports. I was very active, very good body. Maybe that's genes, maybe that's magic, maybe that's I don't know what. So I'm not against. I don't think parents should take their kids off of a meat diet unless the kid wants to, for one, if they're very adamant about not eating it. And if that's because they're looking at too much shit on the internet and they're getting scared, well, you might need to take a look into that too there, just in case they're getting the wrong information. But unless you found an alternative with high protein and high vitamins and high stuff like that, because, there is stuff in meat that you can't get anywhere else. Yes, you might be eating dead animals and stuff like that, but if there is blood, there's iron and shit like that in that animal, and, our ancestors did eat animals, so that's a whole topic that I'll probably never get into, because, like I said, I don't believe in eating animals, but I'm never going to tell anybody that they should go this route. However, if you are, I would say try to do it the way it used to be. Back in the day, the meat on your plate was the smallest portion. Your vegetables are the biggest, and, your side dish, your pasta, or your carbs, basically, were, a medium. Whereas nowadays, there's more emphasis on sometimes the side and sometimes on the meat. And then you have all these other things, and, the vegetables are the smallest one. You grab chicken wings, and you got, 3 carrots and 2 celery sticks, or vegetables are just on there for decoration nowadays. Which vegetables you get water from, and the water has minerals, the water's alkaline in it, and you're getting all these vitamins, magnesium, different fucking things. There's more in a vegetable than there is in that fucking meat or in those carbs. However, carbs hit a different part, and everything hits a different part. And Jerry Tennant actually talks about things like vegetable oil as well as salt, how everybody, no trans fats. Well, you do need some of those, because the parts that he talks about that are the conductors or the capacitors, the battery packs, the things that your muscles and the energy that you take in, the electricity you take in, that the things that store, hold, or are in charge of sending the energy, those things are built with whatever you put in your body. Everything you put in your things aren't just made in your body from nothing. It's whatever you're taking in. And it's not always just through your mouth, it's not always just what you drink. It's what you smell, it's what you touch, it's what you absorb through your skin. It's everything. The water you absorb through your skin is, you get way more water in a bath than you do drinking. But anyways, so if you're not putting in the right stuff, then you can't make the right stuff. And simply all vegetables is not going to do that. You're going to have a lot of good vitamins, and your system's going to be able to work well. But when it comes time to regenerate some of these important parts, well, if you don't have some fucking carbs in there, and the good carbs, like some things, I don't know, vegetable oil, I want to say some olive oil is probably one of the best, and not like doused in it, that it's killing all the nutrients and boiling all the vitamins out of stuff, but a little bit on there, because that makes, it's the difference between building a car out of plastic or metal. Cars depreciate in value, but before a certain year, they used to go up in value, and that's because metal is worth something and plastic fucking isn't. So what do you want your parts made out of, plastic or metal? So this is just a little eye-opener, and to try to save people money by not having to go to the hospital, not having their kids go to the hospital. sometimes, you're going to want to work on some health magic and shit like that, but then there's going to be money situations that are going to come up, and you're going to need to keep focusing your magic on your money. I've certainly been in that position where it's like, fuck, I want to do all these different magics, but I can only focus one at a time because I'm still in my initiation phase, and I'm not even technically supposed to be doing magic, so what the fuck do I do? So stuff like this is a great side line to look at, because when you're in the occult, it's very hard to keep that secrecy vow, at least for me anyways, because all I'm taking in is occult. I'm playing with my baby all day and I'm learning occult stuff. I'm not even working out enough to say that I'm probably doing what Jerry's telling us to do. So taking up this stuff, looking into alkaline stuff and all like that, it's not necessarily occult or magic. However, it ties into it, because as above, so below is so big that if you can learn how the cells work, if you can maintain your cell growth, if you can keep your cells healthy, if you can keep your cells protected, then technically you can live forever, because your cells are what control it. Everybody puts emphasis on the chakras and the heart and the brain and the blood and the bones and all this stuff, and all those things are important, but all those things are made up from cells. Cells are the beginning point. I don't know if it was this interview or another interview, but he said something, and it went along the lines of physics always comes before biology. And what he meant was, when there's a process happening in your body, basically, before anything else, the electrons, basically what's happening in your body is when your cells need to do something, they need more electrons. And that's what he's talking about when the pHs are different numbers and shit like that. They want more electrons, or they don't have enough electrons, and that's a different pH number and shit like that. So the higher the pH number you put in your body, basically, the higher the electrons you're putting in your body. Remember how I said electrons, the negative electricity is actually the healing electricity? Well, here's more fucking proof of that. Just like, your organs continuously dying off and reborn and regenerating continuously over and over again is more proof of reincarnation. But anyways, so biology is second. So if you're trying to use chemistry to influence your biology, well, you're not going to do it, because you need to use physics to fucking get your cells to listen first, because the cells are what everything's made up of. So as above, so below. We're taking care of the below right now. We're learning how to fix and regenerate and heal ourselves. And if you don't think this is magic, you should still listen to it anyways, because when it comes to doing healing magic and you have a broken fucking foot and you want to fix it up, well, you're going to want to tell your cells to do what? Well, you're going to want to tell them to have a certain charge. You're going to want to tell them that, your cells, I want you to have so much extra electrons going there, whatever. This is how you can be precise in your spell to affect healing. All right? So anyways, I hope you enjoy. I'll be back on after. And yeah, here you go. Jerry Tenant, everybody.
Opportunity to be either an electron donor or an electron stealer. So in order to figure out which it is, use a sophisticated voltmeter, so to speak, called a pH meter. And when you measure a liquid with a pH meter, it will give you either the pH, or you can flip a switch and it will read it out in millivolts. So the reality then is voltage in a liquid we call pH. And by convention, if you find that the solution is an electron stealer, you put a plus sign in front of the voltage. And if it's an electron donor, you put a minus sign in front of it. And then you convert the voltage that you measure with a logarithmic scale going from 0 to 14 and call that pH. So plus 400 millivolts of electron stealer is the same as a pH of 0, whereas minus 400 millivolts of electron donor is the same thing as a pH of 14. And if it's neutral, if it's neither electron donor or electron stealer, then that's a pH of 7. So when we say that cells must run at a pH of 7.35 to 7.45, we're saying cells must run between minus 20 and minus 25 millivolts. Well, that was a wowzer for me. Guess what? Cells need energy to work. That makes sense. Now, by the way, people sometimes get confused with these numbers, because if you take a cell in a petri dish and you put an electrode inside the cell and one outside the cell and you measure across the cell membrane, you get about minus 90 millivolts. But hopefully not very many of you have your cells in Petri dishes. But in the environment of this body, they're designed to run at minus 20 to minus 25 millivolts. So one of the things that you will find is the characteristic of essentially all chronic disease is that you have low voltage going to that organ. So, so we are constantly wearing ourselves out and needing to make new cells. So what I'm seeing here is one slide behind that one, apparently. Okay. So we are constantly wearing ourselves out and having to make new cells. So the macula in your eye today is only 48 hours old. In other words, you get new cells in the macula every 48 hours. The lining of your gut is 3 weeks old. The skin you're sitting in today is 6 weeks old. Your liver is 8 weeks old, and your nervous system is 8 months old. So we are constantly wearing ourselves out and having to make new cells. So it turns out then that chronic disease only occurs when you lose the ability to make new cells at work. Let me say that one more time. Chronic disease only occurs when you lose the ability to make new cells at work. Well, if that's the case, then we need to ask the question, what does it take to make a new cell that works? Well, as I mentioned, it takes minus 25 millivolts for a cell to run, but to make a new one, it takes double that. It takes minus 50 millivolts. And then in addition to having the voltage to make new cells, we have to have all of the nutrients to make a new cell. So if your house gets blown down with a tornado and you have to build a new one, guess what? You have to have everything you need to bake it. You can't build a new house with doorknobs and bathroom tiles. You have to have shingles and rafters and doors and windows, etc. You have to have everything it takes. And this is a big mistake people make when they're trying to get well, is they try one substance at a time, saying that, well, I want to see what works. Well, it's not going to work because I have to have everything all at one time to build a new cell. So we have to have minus 50 millivolts of energy. We have to have everything it takes to make a cell. And then we have to deal with any of the toxins that are hanging around that damage cells as fast as we make them. And the most common toxins we have to deal with are heavy metals like mercury, toxins coming out of our teeth, and GMO foods with the pesticide called Roundup or glyphosate. Now, the body actually has 4 different battery packs because the human body is a portable electronic device. Like all electronic devices, it has to have a battery pack or multiple battery packs. And so the reality is that we have these 4 different packs. Now, the largest one of all is our muscles. Now, our muscles are piezoelectric, and for those of you who aren't physicists, that funny word piezoelectricity means that if you stress a substance and it emits electrons, that's called piezoelectricity. So when I move my muscles, I'm generating electrons, which is, by the way, why exercise is so important, because exercise is the way the human body is designed to recharge your own personal battery pack. But the reality is also that our muscles are rechargeable batteries. And so we have then these large muscles, which are our main batteries. And then these muscles, battery packs, are all hooked to our cell membranes. Now, cell membranes are capacitors. So what is a capacitor? Well, a capacitor is a small battery. And the way our cell membranes are designed is with a couple of opposing layers of funny fats called phospholipids. And these fats have a ball and then 2 legs. Well, the balls are electron conductors and the legs are insulators. So when you put them like this, you have 2 conductors separated by insulator, which by definition is a capacitor, which means it stores electrons. And then inside the cell, we have a mitochondria. And inside the mitochondria, we have another rechargeable battery system. When that battery system is charged up, we call it ATP. And then as it gives away its electrons and discharges, we call it ADP. Well, because we have a rechargeable battery system inside our mitochondria, guess what else we need in there? a battery charger. The battery charger inside the cell is called the citric acid cycle or the Krebs cycle. So the Krebs cycle runs on primarily fatty acids, and so as you put fatty acids through the Krebs cycle, it creates electrons, and for every unit of fatty acids that you put through the Krebs cycle, if oxygen is present, you get enough electrons to charge up 38 of these ATP batteries. Now, in addition, we have the DNA. Now, DNA inside of our cells, we generally tend to look at it from the side, and we look like we took a couple of step ladders and twisted them. But if you look at it from the top, it looks like this. And every circle of DNA is golden mean, and what that means is that it's 1.618 times the diameter is 1.618 times the height and so forth. And any place in the universe where there is something that's golden mean, or in the shape of a platonic solid, it will cause implosion of scalar energy. So because our DNA is golden mean, then scalar implodes into it and gives it its charge so it has the energy to do its job. So then we have our muscles then are stacked one on top of each other in a very specific order, like stacking batteries in a flashlight. And so surrounding this stack of muscle batteries, we have a substance called fascia, which is very much like a stocking. And of course, fascia is that shiny stuff you see when you carve the Christmas turkey. Now, the interesting thing about fascia is that fascia is a semiconductor. So what in the world is a semiconductor? A semiconductor is a collection of molecules arranged in such a way that electrons move through it at the speed of light, but only in one direction. So we have then this continuous stack of fascia going from our toes up to our brain, or from our fingers up to our brain, and surrounded by this stocking, which serves basically as the wiring system for the body. So we have then the stack of muscle batteries surrounded by the fascia, so that every organ in the body has its own battery pack. Because every organ in the body has its own battery pack, then we have the ability to isolate, measure that voltage, and figure out why that organ's malfunctioning. Now, a stack of muscle batteries is what's been called an acupuncture meridian. So an acupuncture meridian is simply a stack of muscle batteries. Now, so this is an example of an acupuncture meridian called the spleen meridian. And the spleen meridian, oops, go back the other way. There you go. So the spleen meridian starts down in the big toe, goes up the inside of the leg, and then it goes, there's a special branch, as you can see, goes over to the female genitalia. Then it goes around the back where it gets the adrenal glands, the spleen and the pancreas. Then it goes on up into the neck and makes a loop and hooks into what's called the stomach circuit. And then the stomach circuit gets the macula of the eye. So by the way, if anybody has macular degeneration, it's because you have low voltage in your stomach circuit. It powers the frontal lobes, which is the thinking part of your brain. Then it gets the thyroid, the breast, the stomach, the male genitalia, and then back down to the big toe, so it makes a loop. So we have 6 of these loops of muscle batteries that provide the 25 millivolts you need for the organs to work and the 50 millivolts to repair them. So chronic disease occurs when one of these muscle battery packs won't hold a charge. So then that leads us to the question, well, why won't that battery pack hold a charge? Well, there is a checklist that you can go through to try to figure out why it won't hold a charge. But basically, you have to look at thyroid hormone, because the thyroid hormone T3 controls the voltage of every cell membrane in the body, and T2 controls the voltage in the mitochondria. So you have to be sure and get the thyroid hormone levels correct. Then if you were to put a scar across one of these circuits, so if you put a scar across one of these muscle battery packs here, it's going to short it out and it'll drain off some of the voltage. So scars can be a significant problem. But the only scars that really take you completely down are those on the main line on your main cable. A scar across your knee or something will generally just lower it a few millivolts, but enough to cause some problems. In addition, emotions are stored in the body as magnetic fields. So if you have a magnetic field that's stuck in one of these muscle battery packs here, it's going to block the voltage so it won't go through. And then finally, dental infections are a significant problem because each of these circuits go through very specific teeth. So here you see that we have this main cable that goes up the back and down the front. And then from that main cable, you get the voltage coming from our arms and our legs. And they come up to these lateral terminals. And then from those lateral terminals, they go to this center one, and then it starts looping around the body. And as it loops around the back, it has the option then of going out and attaching to the ganglia that are up and down the spinal cord, which we call the autonomic ganglia. And then from the autonomic ganglia, it goes to every organ in the body. So that's the human body's wiring system and battery pack system. And so whenever you have chronic disease, you will have failure of one of these electronic systems. So you simply have to start out whenever you have some sort of illness, asking the question, so what's the battery pack to that illness? So if you have heart disease, you would say, what's the battery pack for the heart? Well, it's obviously the heart muscle battery pack. There are others that are not as obvious. For example, the example I gave you of spleen-stomach. The spleen-stomach circuit is the power supply for the entire endocrine system, the entire reproductive system in both males and females, the macula of the eye, and the thinking part of the brain. And of course, when that system goes out, which is one of the more common ones to go out, then you start having failure of those organ systems. So how do we know if the voltage is low in a circuit? Well, we have the ability to measure it with certain acupuncture points using what amounts to a specially designed ohm meter. Now, as we began to then identify the power packs that is not working correctly, we have two things in front of us. One is to figure out why that battery pack won't hold a charge, and then the second is to try to recharge the battery pack while we're figuring out how to fix the reason that we got into trouble in the first place. So we have developed this device called a biotransducer that puts out both electromagnetic and scalar energy, and if you simply aim it at the failing organ, you can begin to recharge the cells in that organ itself. And then you want to come behind it and you want to charge the muscle battery packs. And these diagrams that we have here, where you see the red and the black dots, show you where to put the polarity, because every battery pack, like every other battery you're aware of, has terminals and polarity. So you take patches and you stick the patches on to where the terminals of that battery pack that doesn't have enough charge. Hook it onto the biomodulator, which is a little portable device that looks a bit like a computer mouse. And it puts out waveforms that are designed to implode energy and transfer energy to the cells and recharge your muscle battery packs. So you're recharging the organ, you're recharging the muscle battery packs while you're working on figuring out, well, why won't that battery pack hold a charge in the first place? Now, one of the interesting things is that our bodies are wired up like many circuit boards. As you know, many electronic circuit boards use Tesla resonating circuits. A Tesla resonating circuit is a combination of a capacitor and a coil wired in parallel. And when you do that, it has the ability to communicate with other systems that are a combination of Tesla resonating circuits. So in the body, the lung is always wired to the large intestine, the heart's always wired to the small intestine, the spleen and pancreas are always wired to the stomach, the kidney's always wired to the bladder, and the liver's always wired to the gallbladder. Each of these create in a Tesla resonating circuit. And because they are Tesla circuits, they're able to communicate with each other. So one part of our body knows what's going on in the other part of the body because we're wired up with Tesla resonating circuits. Now, all of these various circuits in the body go through very specific teeth. And so the teeth act like circuit breakers. So if you begin to have an infection in one of your teeth, it will at first begin to reduce the voltage that's in that circuit and later actually switch it off. So the circuit we've been talking about, the spleen-stomach circuit, is the one that you see in yellow here. It's the upper molars and lower premolars. And so if you have an infection in an upper molar, then it's going to begin to affect your spleen-stomach circuit, which means it's going to affect, as I mentioned, your entire reproductive system, your entire endocrine system, the thinking part of your brain, and the macula of your eye. So most people with macular degeneration have an infection in an upper molar on the same side as their macular degeneration. Now, one of the issues then is how do teeth enter into this illness of action? Let me say that one more time. The majority of chronic disease actually begins as an emotional event. And that emotion is a magnetic field that starts blocking the circuit by getting caught in one of the teeth. And as it does so, it begins to lower the voltage in the tooth. Now, Dr. Steinman showed that every tooth has within it a pump that pumps fluid from inside the tooth to inside the mouth, and that's what keeps you from getting cavities. Your kids will be happy to know that it's not Snicker bars that are causing their cavities, it's the failure of this pump. So when the pump begins to fail, then infection comes from the mouth into the tooth and begins to cause decay. So the emotion begins to lower the voltage enough in the tooth that the pump begins to fail, and then you begin to get a cavity, and then you begin to get a crown, and then you begin to eventually keep going until you get a root canal, and then that leads eventually to having a malignancy. So again, most of the chronic disease begins as emotions. Now, obviously, there are some circumstances where that's not the case. If you were living in Tokyo when Fukushima blew up and you were radiated, obviously that's not necessarily an emotional event in the sense that you may not have known you just got radiated, but it's going to make you sick. But generally speaking, most of the emotions, or most of the chronic disease we have, we can trace back to an emotion that actually begins with an emotional event, plus 30 millivolts. So what you see is that normal tissue is running at electron donor, which is minus 25 millivolts. And as you go past zero, you have flipped the polarity. That is that every battery, as you know, has a plus on one end and a minus on the other. And as you drain, which is indistinguishable from a placenta in a pregnant female. So basically all solid tumors are placentas. That is the body's way of responding to lack of voltage and oxygen. So if we begin then to think about the way that this works, think about my thumb. My thumb is a perfectly good thumb, by the way. It's running at what voltage? Minus 25 millivolts. Now I hit it with a hammer and I destroy some cells in my thumb. What's going to happen is that the thumb's immediately going to go to minus 50 millivolts. And minus 50 millivolts causes the arterioles to dilate. And the reason that happens, of course, is we need the raw materials dumped at the curb there, so to speak, so that we can rebuild the cells we destroyed with the hammer. Well, when those capillaries dilate, we get all the signs we normally call inflammation. We have redness, we have swelling, we have heat, we have a pulsing pain, and it makes you say bad words. So my thumb gets busy and it makes new cells. It replaces those I smashed with a hammer. It goes back to minus 25 millivolts, and I'm a happy camper. But on the other hand, if when I smash my thumb, if the power supply going to the thumb is inadequate to provide the minus 50 voltage begins to drop, then oxygen begins to drop. And when oxygen drops, there are several bad things that begin to happen. Um, One of the things that, as I mentioned earlier, is that you began to have less ATP, which is the voltage inside the cell that the cell needs to do its business. Now, I also mentioned to you that because of the Krebs cycle being able to recharge 38 of these ATP batteries for every unit of fatty acid you put through the Krebs cycle, that's only true if oxygen is available. If oxygen is unavailable, then for every unit of fatty acid you put through the battery charger, you only get enough electrons to charge up 2 batteries. So it's a bit like having a car that goes from 38 miles to the gallon to 2 miles to the gallon. Your cells become very inefficient. Now, in addition to having inefficiency of the intracellular voltage, we have problems with bugs. Now, the body contains perhaps 1 trillion bugs of various kinds, and the majority of them are suppressed by oxygen. But as oxygen levels begin to drop because voltage drops, then these bugs wake up. And the first thing the bugs want to do is have lunch, and they want to have you for lunch. Now, bugs don't have teeth, so they can take a bite out and lose their cell membranes. So they become what have been called cell wall deficient organisms, or stealth pathogens. One of the problems for them, secondly, with that is, first of all, you see inside red blood cells consuming them. In the lower right, you see these various cell wall deficient bugs. I'm going to skip past this. So, time charged up. And eventually, in the car battery, the corrosion will come outside the battery itself and start corroding through your battery cable, which now means you have a total short circuit and your car won't start. Well, this process occurs in the body when the infection in the tooth moves out into the bone. So when you have infection in the bone around the tooth, it actually works just like a circuit breaker and takes down that circuit. And then the two circumstances in which that occurs is either a root canal tooth, which is, of course, a dead tooth. Most of you may know the way you do a root canal is you drill a little hole in the top of the tooth and you put an auger down in and you rip out the artery and rip out the nerve and kill the tooth, and then you fill it with putty. The problem is that now the tooth is dead and all dead tissue gets infected. The dentists are the only physicians that believe you can get away with leaving dead tissue in the body. No other doctor believes that. So one root canal tooth shuts down 63% of your immune system. So, and then what makes it worse is that it then gets out into the bone, and when it gets into the bone, it shuts off that circuit, and so now the voltage drops significantly in that circuit, and that's why you find we looked at all the cancer patients we've seen in our clinic, and 95% of them were associated with a root canal or an infected bone where a tooth had been pulled. 95%. So a leading contributor to cancer is having an infection in the bone around one of the teeth. Now, in addition to root canals, there's a problem when teeth get pulled because teeth are held into the bone by a ligament called the periodontal ligament. What dentists are trained to do is wiggle the tooth, make it loose, take it out, put a stitch in, quit, leaving the ligament behind. When you do that, it's very hard for the bone to heal because the ligament's in the way. And even if the dentist happens to be one who takes the time to scrape out that ligament, because the mouth's such a dirty place, oftentimes people get infection in the bone during the first few days of healing once a tooth's been pulled. So and that's called a cavitation, by the way. So whether you have infection from a root canal or from a cavitation, it tends to shut down the circuit. And one of the problems is that infection in the bone then tends to move over and take out the next circuit. So a huge problem is that our kids are in high school, they go to the dentist and they say, oh, you got to get your wisdom teeth out. It's that old thing of, well, if you go to Midas, you get a muffler. So a study came out last year showing that 65% of root canal extractions were unnecessary. Well, nevertheless, they get their wisdom teeth pulled, and now they start getting infection in that area. And the wisdom teeth circuit is heart, small intestine, but listen, it's the autonomic nervous system. Autonomic nervous system is the body's on-off switches. So all of a sudden, within days after getting their wisdom teeth extracted, the kids have lost their on-off switch, which means their body doesn't know how to control itself. Then over time, it begins to move next door and takes out the spleen-stomach circuit. Now remember that the spleen circuit is the power supply to the adrenal glands. So now soon they've lost their control panel, their on-off system, and then they lose their adrenals, so they can't deal with stress, and so they began to become what many people say, oh, he's just a teenager. Well, no, he's not just a teenager. He's lost his ability, the whole way the body deals with stress. And so many of our kids hide themselves within electronics, because within the electronics they have an on-off switch. In their body they don't, so they can't deal with the real world anymore. And so they hide within their cell phone and their Game Boys or whatever you call them. Nevertheless, this is a huge problem. Now, when you lose, I only got 5 minutes left. So when you lose your ability to make adrenaline, you go down the following slippery slope. You have trouble going to sleep. You have trouble dealing with stress. You have trouble with your memory. And then you can't multitask. So you're sitting reading a book or watching TV and somebody says, hey, do you want mustard or mayonnaise? You become very annoyed because they interrupted you. But you don't have the mental horsepower to stay attached to whatever you're doing, so you detach, you pick mustard, you go back to your book, and now you can't remember your place, and you're even more annoyed. And then it gets to where you don't like any stimulus, so you don't like loud noises, loud music, rowdy crowds, can't be around people who are arguing. And eventually it gets to where you don't even want to be touched, you just want to sit in the corner and have people leave you the heck alone. And then your sexual equipment quits working, and then you can't go to sleep before 11, and when you wake up, you're still tired. All of that's due to the loss of the spleen power supply to your adrenals. Well, what I've just described, of course, is very destructive. If you can't deal with the life of the world, you can't be a good spouse, and particularly if your sexual equipment doesn't work anymore, then that's a big problem in a marriage. You can't be a good parent because kids make noise and want something from you, and you have nothing to give. You can't be a good worker. You can't be a good friend. You can't be good at much of anything, so your life's in the toilet simply because you've lost the spleen circuit that goes to the adrenal glands. And that's a huge problem in our society. Well, now, Eileen McCusick spoke earlier about mapping the field of emotions, and this is the traditional Chinese one, so that the various circuits have these various sorts of emotions get stuck in these various particular places or in the teeth that are associated with these. Dr. Banas published these, and of course Eileen has published hers, which is this group of where things get stuck. And as far as erasing emotions are concerned, because emotions are a magnetic field, you can erase them with a stronger magnetic field. One of the laws of physics is if you take any magnet and you put a stronger magnet over it, then the weaker magnet assumes the characteristics of the stronger one. And so when you have these emotions that are stuck, you can begin to erase them in a variety of different ways. Now, there are various groups over the years that have looked at this subject and tried to figure out how to do it. EFT, Psych-K, emotion code, psychosomatic energetics, et cetera, et cetera. But certainly we had developed one where you can, if you can think about emotion while holding onto these hand grips with your biomodulator, you could erase the emotion. But when we did that, we were doing in one emotion at the time. And of course, Eileen talked to you this morning about using her tuning fork to do it, which is very effective. What I have recently found is that if you treat the wisdom teeth, which treats your autonomic nervous system, then you can begin to knock out, you can not only change the polarity in all of your various circuits at one time, but also knock out many of the motions automatically. Now, a pendulum is actually like a single string on a guitar, and the weight on the pendulum makes the string taut. So when it's moved, it's actually resonating with whatever frequency the string is. So what you do is you hold this pendulum over the small intestine, heart, small intestine, autonomic system, and you take the biotransducer and simply put it over the wisdom teeth, and you watch the pendulum, and it'll always be spinning backwards if the voltage is low, counterclockwise, and you keep holding it there, and pretty soon it'll slow down, and then it'll start spinning clockwise. And then you do the same on the other side, again, holding the pendulum over the heart, small intestine circuit, put the biotransducer over the autonomic system where you can access it with the tooth, watch it spin backwards and in the correct way, and now when you go back and check all of the circuits, you've corrected the polarity in every circuit, and many of the emotions that you had found out in the biofield are already gone as well. So, unfortunately, I don't have the time to talk to you about how we're wired up with polarity and with how our body's all golden mean and how implosion occurs. But if you're interested in those subjects, then we have some videos that will help you in that area. Plus, we'll be giving some demonstration. If there are any of you in the audience who happen to have any motion, anybody here? We'll be doing some demonstrations in the breakout room. So what I've hoped to accomplish in these few minutes I had to talk with you is to help you understand that the body is an electronic device which has multiple battery packs, and the chronic disease occurs when those battery packs won't hold a charge, and that getting well involves you identifying which battery packs are failing you, identifying the reason that they're failing you and fixing that, so that it's basically what we're doing is like you coming home from work and opening the fridge and it's hot in there and the lamp in the living room won't turn on, the TV in the bedroom won't turn on, and you go out in the garage and flip the circuit breaker and now everything works. Well, that's the way we do medicine now, is we figure out which circuit breaker is out, go fix it, turn you back on, and let your body heal itself, which it does very well if it has the voltage, the nutrients, and deal with the toxins. Thank you for allowing me to be here.
Cold open.
Traveling in packs that I can't carry anymore, but waiting for somebody else to carry me. There's nothing that's there for me at my door. All the people I know aren't who they used to be. And if I try to change my life one more day, there would be nobody else to save. And I can't change into a person I don't wanna be, so oh, it's Saturday night. I pray for the wicked on the weekend. Mama, can I get another amen? Oh, it's Saturday night. Swear to God, I ain't never gonna repent. Mama, can I get another amen? Oh, it's Saturday night. Yeah. Every morning when I wake up, I wanna be who I couldn't say I'd ever been. But it's so much more than I ever was. If every night I go to sleep knowing that I gave everything that I had to give, and it's all I could have asked for. I've been standing up beside everything I've ever said, but oh, it's Saturday night. I pray for the wicked on the weekend. Mama, can I get another amen? Oh, it's Saturday night. Swear to God, I ain't never gonna repent. Mama, can I get another amen? Oh, it's Saturday night. Yeah. If I had one more day to wish, if I had one more day to be better than I could have ever been, if I had one could be better, but baby, oh, it's Saturday night. I pray for the wicked on the weekend. Mama, can I get another amen? Oh, it's Saturday night. Swear to God, I ain't never gonna repent. Mama, can I get another amen? Oh, it's Saturday night. Yeah. It's Saturday, Saturday, it's Saturday. It's Saturday night. Yeah. I swear to God, swear to God, swear to God.
All right, that was Saturn's song I like to play. I do have one more little 3-minute clip I want to play of Mr. Jerry Turner. Sorry, I'm getting his name wrong. Gosh darn it, that's silly. Whenever I just did a whole big thing on the man. But anyways, Jerry, quite a good man coming out doing this. There's a lot of different videos, so if I said anything prior to this that it wasn't in that clip, or it's not going to be in the next clip, just know that it's because I watched so many of his other videos, so my bad on that. But anyways, it's pretty powerful stuff. And like I said, if you're one of those people that have root canals and you're getting scared by that, don't worry about it. First of all, you're practicing magic, so you can change and protect and do a whole lot of things. And now that you're aware of it, I mean, you just got to keep rinsing out your mouth if you think you have infection there. And if you don't have any issues there, then you don't have any issues there. I mean, I'm not trying to get anybody worried or anything like that. I've never had one, and my mother's had plenty of them, and she's going strong. There's nothing wrong with her whatsoever. So I mean, it is and it isn't, right? I wouldn't let this stuff worry you. But the main focus here, because let's say even if that was causing an issue with you, whether it was pain or, because I mean, some of these things when they start, like he said, his was very severe, but they can start to kind of fuck up your mind, the way you think, your judgment, your eyesight. You could be thinking you've got glaucoma or something. I don't know. But anyways, you'd be thinking you're nearsighted or farsighted. And it turns out it's something wrong with the lower part of your body. I mean, this is just an exaggeration, an example. That's probably unlikely. But like he was saying stuff about his toe and having feeling, you know what I mean, somewhere else in his body that wasn't even near there. And that's because of the way the systems are lined up. If all the systems for your feet were right near your feet, well then whenever your foot got ran over by a fucking truck, if all the important stuff were right there with it, I mean, then you'd be effed. There'd be no way to fix that. But fortunately, our creator, the all, who, our subconscious, everything, the way we're designed is very intelligent. The things for the lower half of the body, are higher up for different muscles, and the things for the higher up part of the body are lower. It's pretty amazing. So yeah, like I was saying before, the physics always comes before the biology, and that's what my main point of putting this out here is, to get you to think about the cells a little bit, because healing magic is the hardest probably magic, or most complicated. I mean, Birch has numerous different videos talking about negativity and positivity, and negative and positive, negative ions, negative energy being could be a very healing energy. And positive energy is actually what you're bombarded whenever it's the Wi-Fi signal and all that. I don't know if he went into it in this video, but he's got another video where, it's definitely a different one, where he's speaking to a woman. She's asking him questions. And he says if he gives an example, if he goes to push, a man in good shape, just pushes his chest, he's not going to move very far. But if he was to put a watch, basically, I forget the name of the watch, and it probably has some relevance, but if he was to put a watch on his chest and then do it, he would be able to make that man fall down, because there's a magnetic pull, because an older watch runs on magnets and pulleys and different things like that. Cranks is what I meant to say. And that's an example he gave, because that magnetic energy from that watch has an effect on the body. So the point he was getting at in this separate video, that wasn't the one I just gave you, was that Wi-Fi and everything else, it's not magnetic. It's like it's the other kind of electricity. It's the positive, whereas the magnetic is the negative energy. They're both needed, but both, if you have too much of either one of those only, you're unbalanced. But so the first thing that always has to be figured out now, if you have smaller issues, you know, if you have a swollen face, then yeah, you put ice on it. You're not necessarily going to have to drink a bunch of electrolytes, you know, a bunch of alkaline water and go work out. However, now that you know this, you know, don't go around preaching it to people. Put it into practice on yourself. Next time you're not feeling well, drink some. You know, if you don't like the salt water idea, like, I mean, I don't care. Like I said before, or maybe I didn't say it before, maybe I wrote it down, but I look at eating as in, what do I want to put in my body to make my body last as long as I possibly can? I don't eat for pleasure anymore. I don't eat for the taste, you know. We go out to restaurants and stuff sometimes, you know, and that's when I'll sometimes drink. Stuff like that, but I look at food, and it's not about, oh, I don't like that taste. You know, it's about, is this going to help me? Is this important to me? Is this going to, you know, and I don't always eat like that. There are times where I have a cheesecake just because I like cheesecake, you know, things like that. However, I force myself to drink those 10 bottles of water we're supposed to a day, and that's probably because you can't absorb that water, so they want you to take 10 so you at least absorb a little bit. That's why you piss it out so fast. But I drink those 10 bottles of water a day, but I put salt in mine. So I wanted to hit on that. I already talked about the chicken noodle soup and the electrolytes and the exercise. You know, all these things are super important. They all go together. So if you're listening to this and you have some kind of issue, I'm not saying that to just do this and it's going to go away, all right? But it certainly could. And, you know, if you can pinpoint your problem, the better off you'll be. But now knowing that if you put a lot of electrolytes in your body, a lot of electricity in your body, a lot of alkaline foods and water in your body, and you add that to exercise, especially if you can figure out which exercises are actually going to benefit you the most, then, you know, you won't be having this issue, you know. I mean, you have the best chance, you know. You add that to whatever you're doing with your doctor or medications and shit like that, and you're going to be unstoppable. You know what I mean? And that's why he hit on in that one interview. That's why oils work for some people and for some people they don't. To me, that has a lot to do with belief, because, you know, I've seen, I've heard, I've seen, I've known of people who don't really change the alkaline in their body and do some things with, you know, frankincense and oils and, you know, change their mindset and get good results. So I'm not saying this is everything, but because it addresses the cellular level on how to help your cells grow, regenerate, you know, it's super important. It's something I thought everybody should know. And the one thing he said, and I don't know if it was in this one either, but he said the body never forgets how to heal. It knows, however, it can only heal once you find the problem and give your body what it needs to heal. Okay, that was me writing that. And stop putting garbage. This is why some can heal through diet and exercise. Disease is loss of energy or loss of materials for the systems to function. Sorry about that. So yeah, what he said was the body never forgets to heal. When you get a disease, it's because you're lacking either that electricity in your body or the parts that store the electricity or spread the electricity, you know, send the electricity where they have to go, you know, doing the distributing. Then that's not working. You know, everything in your body is cells, runs on cells. So even the things that are doing these jobs technically have cells inside of them. And I'm sure you can keep bringing this down to infinity. And we haven't, but they probably don't bother because it would be, you know, redundant and endless. But that's the point. You need to take care of yourselves. And if that means, you know, you got to put a little bit of salt in all your different drinks you drink, or at least, you know, I'm going to drink 5 drinks a day. You know, they say when you do a detox or a cleanse, if you can't go buy specific things, this is what you do. You put the big pieces of Himalayan sea salt in there because of the minerals that's in it, because it's highly alkaline and it's got a high pH, plus your body thinks it's kind of a food, so it doesn't just go through the urinary tract. It actually goes into your digestive system, and it helps pull the other things out. This is if you're doing simply just a water cleanse. Now, I'm not going to get into the Thoth and Archangel, Raphael, all that stuff. I was planning on doing some things and find some correlations, but I don't think I'm going to be able to do that today. However, I am going to get into a little bit about Mercury and the signs. I was just, during the episode, I was looking online, I looked at this thing, and it said Mercury was Earth, and Venus was water, and I was like, what the fuck? And then it said Saturn. I forget what it said Saturn was. It was either Earth or air. I couldn't remember. So if what you think and is different from what I say, just understand that You know, like I said before, you can put the sun in different places. You can put whatever, wherever you want, whatever works for you. Okay, I do believe that they do have a specific correspondence, and the more people that believe in that specific way, there's more power in that way. But anyways, we're going to get into some of this when we come back. I'm going to play that last little part I have of Jerry. It's just a small part talking about emotion, getting trapped in the body, different emotions and what they affect, and stuff like that. So, yeah, I'll be back in about 5 or 6 minutes.
This is gospel for the fallen ones, locked away in permanent slumber, assembling their philosophies from pieces of broken memories. Oh, 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 oh. The gnashing teeth and criminal tongues conspire against the odds, but they haven't seen the best of us yet. If you love me, let me go. If you love me, let me go. 'Cause these words are knives and often leave scars. The fear of falling apart. Truth be told, I never was yours. The fear of falling apart. This is gospel for the vagabonds, ne'er-do-wells, and insufferable bastards, confessing their apostasies, led away by imperfect imposters. Oh, 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 Don't try to sleep through the end of the world and bury me alive, 'cause I won't give up without a fight. If you love me, let me go. If you love me, let me go. 'Cause these words are knives and often leave scars. The fear of falling apart. Truth be told, I never was yours. The fear of falling apart. The fear of falling apart.
Or a wisdom tooth, and now you go weak. That is evidence that that circuit is short-circuited. Now, for many years, I believed that this was prima facie evidence of an infection in the tooth. I have to tell you that I believe I was wrong, because what I'm finding is that there are often this test will fail, or the patient will fail this test, but nothing has been done to the tooth and nothing can be found on x-ray, and yet you still fail this test. And what I've come to realize is that it's the emotional magnetic fields that get stuck in the teeth that cause the voltage to drop. So you can have a tooth that fails this O-ring test, and that's caused by an emotional blockage, and there's no infection involved at this point. I do believe that the emotion is the root cause that eventually will cause the voltage in that tooth to drop, and then the tooth will eventually get decay and go down that pathway. And then, of course, the things we've discussed will, where you have lack of voltage, then lack of oxygen, then the voltage continues to drop, the cell wall deficient organisms show up, etc. So what we found is that if we remove the emotional blockage and you still fail the O-ring test, you likely have infection in the bone. But if you remove the emotion and now the O-ring test goes from abnormal back to normal, one can make the assumption that the problem was the emotional blockage. Now, different researchers have identified which emotions are stored in which circuits. Traditional Chinese medicine says that anger is stored in the liver gallbladder, fear in the bladder, worry in the spleen stomach, lack of joy in the heart small intestine, grief in the lung large intestine, anxiety in the parasympathetic and sympathetic systems. Dr. Vanis suggested a different set of observations about which emotions are stored in which circuits, and he published that in his book, New Life Through Energy Healing. Eileen McCusick developed what is called biofield tuning, and this is her observations of which emotions get stuck in which circuits. Another thing that's interesting that McCusick has noted is that if you have an emotion that's related to your father, it tends to get stuck on the right side of your body. And if it's related to your mother, it tends to get stuck on the left side of your body. So sometimes you'll find that you have a circuit that is normal on one side and abnormal on the other side.
Try to start again. I don't want to be the one the battles always choose, 'cause inside I realize that I'm the one confused. I don't know what's worth fighting for, or why I have to scream. I don't know why I instigate and say what I don't mean. I don't know how I got this way. I know it's not alright, so I'm breaking out. I'm breaking the habits tonight. Watching my cure, I tightly lock the door. I try to catch my breath again. I hurt much more than any time before. I had no options left again. I don't want to be the one the battles always choose, 'cause inside I realize that I'm the one confused. I don't know what's worth fighting for, or why I have to scream. I don't know why I instigate and say what I don't mean. I don't know how I got this way. I'll never be alright, so I'm breaking the habit. I'm breaking the habit tonight. I'll paint it on the walls, 'cause I'm the one that falls. I'll never fight again, and this is how it ends. I don't know what's worth fighting for, or why I have to scream, but now I have some clarity to show you what I mean. I don't know how I got this way. I'll never be alright, so I'm breaking the habit. I'm breaking the habit. I'm breaking the habit tonight.
Alrighty, what's going on, everybody? I am back, but although briefly. So, like I said, I was going to get into some correspondences between, Mercury, Thoth, Archangel Raphael, because it has to do with healing. And, it's going to be kind of implied, like I've already kind of said, how Mercury holds the caduceus, Thoth and Hermes has been seen to see that. Same with Archangel Raphael, which, Archangel Raphael is an orange. He's, the one that's necessarily in the east. Between yellow and red would be orange, so it's kind of between fire and air. That, take that as you want, basically. But yeah, so like I said, Mercury, I've seen things saying it's Earth a few times now, and it confused the fuck out of me. But, Mercury to me has always been air. You look at the correspondences, all the signs, the zodiac signs for air that are air is Libra, Gemini, and I believe Aquarius. I always thought Aquarius was water because of the whole aqua thing, but Pisces, the one after it, actually is water. And water, Scorpio, Cancer, and Pisces, right? Scorpio, once again, like I said, the snake is the second transformation thing that happens to Scorpio when people embrace their Scorpio in their chart. If they want to become the healer, they got to get to the part of the snake, basically. And I just kind of wanted to, throw an idea out there, anyways, because he talks about the emotions getting trapped in the body. I don't know if I left the clip play long enough, but I know in that same one, and this is all clips where you can actually see visualizations and different things. Like, he gets pretty in depth and shows you slides and all that. But there's a girl, I think the girl who does the tuning fork and maybe the acupuncture. She realized that, if there's emotional blocks from your father, it's generally, I want to say, on your right side, and emotional blocks from your mother, the pain and the affected regions are on the left side. Because, left woman, negative, man plus positive, right? Kind of funny. Water being, the emotional block. It could be, it's basically like water, I guess. Emotions, the moon, the subconscious, it's always been, water. It's always been the element of water, basically. But being that, the zodiac sign Cancer is a water sign, and being that if your emotions can get emotional blocks trapped in your body, technically can stop you from, having good cell growth where it can actually form into a disease. I just find it funny how, the words they choose to pick for this kind of thing. Being that Cancer is a zodiac sign for the crab, and yet they called the disease that probably kills the most people on the planet, or at least, there are places in the world where cancer doesn't exist. Greg Braden says that often. But that being said, I just find it funny, the wording. And, we all know Jesus was a Pisces. He was all about emotions, and, but anyways, so yeah, your air, your Gemini, that's your lungs, right? And this is stuff you could do on your own. You could look at the signs and the zodiac signs for for air, and see the parts of the body and different things like that. And sorry, I'm losing my train of thought. I had things written down. I can't find it. I was going to get into Saturn, how it's 98% nitrogen, 3% helium, and 1% some other stuff and all that. But as I'm thinking about it, it's pretty irrelevant. But anyways, Saturn, the sun, Mercury, to me, those are the air ones. Now, you're going to find some other things out there that say differently. But to me, those are the ones I generally use for up there. For down for water, it's moon, it's Jupiter. I believe air is the only one with 3, and I think that might be why sometimes they say Mercury is Earth and all that, and maybe that's why Saturn is Earth. So that's all up to you. But the last thing the notion I do want to punt is getting your emotional blocks, removing that. That all comes into play with that programming, removing programming, forgiving people for the shit they've done to you. And you're not forgetting in the sense of, oh, that was okay what they did to you. No, that's not what this is. You forgive to let go so you don't carry this shit around, so it doesn't affect you, doesn't harm you, doesn't create any dis-ease in your body, any disease in your body. This is why you're forgiving them. You're letting go. You're saying, you know what? It is what it is. There's nothing I can do about it now. I can dwell on it, hate you for the rest of my life, but that ain't going to do fucking much. Removing that emotion, getting that out of your body, unblocking yourself, that will help you if you do have anything like that in there. and adding some of the salts to your waters and eating the right foods with the high alkalines and doing the right exercises and all that 100% will also help you. Make sure you breathe. Like you said, you need the right oxygen. We need oxygen, and looking up breatharian and all the research on the yogis and how they breathe. In some of the books I already offered, I think it's Sorcerer's Secrets. He goes into all these different breaths, and it's pretty amazing, and they're pretty good. Anytime I'm feeling shitty, that's what I do. I start with a simple four-fold breath, and then I move it up to as much as I can, probably 8 every time. 8 hold in, 8 exhale, 8 nothing, you know what I mean? And then I start holding my breath as long as I can, bring it inside. Sometimes I'll mix a visualization in there, seeing, the breath I pull in, I see a white light or a gold light coming in and go into the affected area, and I'll turn it up sometimes and make it little snakes, this and that and the other thing. But anyways, make sure your water and your air is very important for healing. I mean, that's what they're telling us, with Scorpio, with the snakes, with the caduceus, with Mercury, with Thoth, with Archangel Raphael. They're trying to tell us that, you also need fire, you also need earth, but mostly when it comes to healing, these are the things you're going to want to take a look at. But I'm not going to say too much more because I don't want to take away from all the great shit that you just learned from Jerry Tennant. Take care of your cells. As above, so below. If you take care of your cells, you're not going to have to worry about anything else. You know what I mean? Those cells have a consciousness. They know what to do. So your job is to just find out what they need and give it to them. And just keep giving it to them. Anyways, that's enough for today. Hope you enjoyed the show. And yeah, I'll see you next time. Have a great one. Make sure you check out the shows on Ceremonial Witchcraft and the rest of them on this channel as well. Have a great day.